A woman walks in. Sandra Bullock. She isn't decked out in a flashy designer gown, no diamonds, no fur coat, no entourage, just a simple, yet elegant outfit. The waiter, tall and sharply dressed, immediately sizes her up. His smirk grows. Something about her doesn't sit right with him. Perhaps it's the simplicity, the lack of arrogance. In a place like this, people don't walk in unless they want to show off. But Sandra? She's just here for dinner. But this night? It's about to turn into something none of these guests will ever forget. And what happens next? It'll leave you shocked. Have you ever been unfairly judged? If so, hit the like button now. And if you want to hear more mind-blowing stories of Hollywood's most humble legends, make sure you subscribe. Trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next. The waiter's gaze flicks over to a couple nearby, two wealthy elites who likely own half the city. He leans towards Sandra with exaggerated politeness. "Madam, this might not be the kind of place you're looking for," he says. Sandra, confused, gives a small smile. "Excuse me? Our menu's quite expensive. Maybe I can suggest something more affordable for you," he adds. The rich couple chuckles. A man in a suit raises an eyebrow, watching with amusement. Sandra's smile fades. She's been here before. Not in this restaurant, but in this moment. The moment when people assume they're better than you, when they decide your worth before even knowing your name. But she doesn't argue. She doesn't fight back. She simply nods politely. That's where the waiter makes his biggest mistake. "If you want, I can check if our kitchen has a children's menu," he says. The whole restaurant erupts in soft laughter. Sandra remains silent, looking down for a brief moment. The waiter thinks he's won. He believes he just put a nobody in her place. But what he doesn't notice is the man sitting in the corner, Keanu Reeves. He's watching it all unfold. His glass of wine remains untouched, his expression unreadable. Then, in a low, calm voice, he speaks. "That's enough." The room freezes. The waiter pales. The customers stop laughing. Everyone knows that voice. Everyone recognizes that face. And now, everything is about to change. Sandra didn't speak up, but now, Keanu Reeves is involved. Will he expose the waiter's mistake immediately? Or is there something bigger at play here? Keep watching, because what happens next will completely shock you. The waiter's smirk widens as he sees Sandra lower her gaze. He thinks he's won. He turns to the wealthy couple who had laughed earlier. "You see, madam, this is a place for people who appreciate fine dining, not for—" Before he can finish, a voice interrupts.
Deep. Calm.
Unshakable. "That's enough." A fork clinks against a plate. A waitress freezes mid-step. All eyes turn to the voice. Keanu slowly places his wine glass down. The light catches his face, and even those who hadn't recognized him before now do. The waiter's confidence shatters in an instant. Keanu doesn't yell or curse. His voice remains calm, but there's authority in it. It doesn't need to be proven, it just is. "Do you know who you're talking to?" Keanu asks, tilting his head slightly. The waiter freezes, glancing at Sandra, then back at Keanu. I don't," he stammers. Keanu interrupts, his tone not angry, but disappointed. He slowly stands, adjusting his jacket. The rich guests who had mocked Sandra just moments ago now shift uncomfortably. A hush falls over the restaurant. Because now Keanu Reeves is here and nobody wants to be on the wrong side of him. The waiter swallows hard. He suddenly realizes he may have just ruined his career. But the nightmare? It's just starting. Keanu hasn't exposed Sandra's identity yet. He hasn't raised his voice or demanded an apology. So what's his plan? Is he about to humiliate the waiter, or does he have something even bigger in mind? Keep watching, because what happens next will completely shock you. Sandra sits quietly, her fingers resting lightly on the edge of the table. She could have spoken up, put the waiter in his place right then and there. But she didn't. Because this wasn't the first time. As the restaurant stays silent, we fade into a distant memory. The scene shifts. We're no longer in a fancy restaurant. Instead, we see a young girl, no older than 10, sitting alone on a school bench. The school bell rings. Other kids laugh and run past, but she stays still, looking down at her worn-out shoes. A group of girls approaches, whispering to one another. "Why do you talk like that?" one asks. "You sound so weird." The young girl lowers her head.
She wants to explain.
She wants to say her dad's in the military, and they move a lot. She never stays in one place long enough to make real friends. But before she can speak, the girls laugh and walk away. She remains silent. Because she learned something that day. When people see you as different, they don't listen, they judge. And sometimes, silence hurts less than fighting back. The restaurant fades back into view. Sandra blinks, snapping out of her memory. She looks at Keanu, realizing he's not just standing up for her. He's standing up for every version of her that was ever ignored, mocked, or underestimated. And for the first time that night, her silence isn't a defense mechanism, it's anticipation. She knows Keanu's not done yet. Keanu's not just here to defend Sandra. He's about to teach the waiter a lesson he'll never forget. But how will he expose Sandra's true identity? Will he do it now? Or does he have something even more powerful in mind? Keep watching, because what Keanu does next will change everything. The restaurant remains dead silent. The waiter, now sweating, shifts uncomfortably. He still doesn't know who Sandra really is, but he knows he messed up. Keanu doesn't break eye contact. Slowly, he walks toward the waiter, his presence sending a chill through the air. In the calmest voice, he asks, "What's the most expensive dish on your menu?" The waiter blinks in surprise. That would be the platinum steak, sir." Keanu nods. "How much?" $5,000, sir," the waiter replies. The rich guests smirk, thinking Keanu's about to flex his wealth. But Sandra knows Keanu, and she knows this isn't about money. Keanu reaches into his jacket and pulls out a sleek, black credit card, tapping it on the table.
"I'll take 2, he says.
The waiter freezes. Sir?" Keanu repeats, voice steady. "One for me and one for her." And that's when the entire restaurant realizes Keanu's not just buying a meal. He's making a statement. The waiter's hand shakes slightly as he scribbles down the order. He rushes to the kitchen, but when he returns, Keanu's already pulling out a chair. Not for himself, but for the waiter. "Sit," Keanu says. The waiter stares at him, shocked. Sir, I can't. I can't sit at a customer's table." Keanu tilts his head slightly. "Why not?" The waiter shifts uncomfortably, clearing his throat. It's just not meant for someone like me, sir." Keanu's lips curl into a knowing smirk. "Exactly." The waiter freezes because now he finally understands his own words thrown back at him. He told Sandra Bullock, one of the biggest stars in the world, that this place wasn't meant for her. And now, he's the one who suddenly doesn't belong. The room feels smaller. The heat from the chandeliers presses down on him. For the first time, he tastes his own arrogance, and it doesn't sit well. The kitchen doors swing open. 2 plates of perfectly grilled platinum steak are placed on the table. Golden cutlery, silver platters. The rich guests lean in, eager to see what happens next. Keanu gently pushes one plate towards Sandra. The other he slides in front of the waiter. "Eat," Keanu says. The waiter's hands shake. Sir, I can't." "Why?" Keanu asks again, his tone still calm. The waiter gulps. "Because it's too expensive." I don't deserve this." Keanu leans in slightly. "And yet, you decided she didn't deserve it either." The waiter's throat closes. A deep silence blankets the restaurant. Sandra watches quietly. This is the kind of lesson that doesn't need shouting. Doesn't need insults. It just needs a mirror. And right now, the waiter's staring straight into it. The entire restaurant watches. The waiter is cornered by his own words. Will he learn from his mistake? Or will his pride make him lose everything? Keep watching, because what happens next will be unforgettable. The waiter stares at the $5,000 meal in front of him.
His throat feels dry.
He can feel hundreds of eyes on him. Rich guests, the restaurant manager, the entire staff. His face burns with shame. He finally understands what Keanu is doing, and it's too late to undo his mistake. Sandra Bullock, The woman he mocked and humiliated has been silent this entire time. But now she speaks. Sandra gently places her fork down and looks directly at the waiter. "You didn't think I belonged here." Her voice is calm. No anger, no arrogance, just understanding. The waiter lowers his head. Sandra leans forward slightly. "But let me ask you something," she continues. "Would you have treated me differently if you had known who I was?" The waiter freezes. That's the real question. A few guests whisper among themselves. One older man widens his eyes in realization. He pulls out his phone, his jaw dropping. "Wait a minute. Is that Sandra Bullock?" Another guest gasps. Suddenly, whispers turn into murmurs. "No way. The Oscar-winning actress. She was in Gravity and Speed. Oh my God, that's her." Phones start coming out. People begin searching. Just like that, the woman they mocked is now the woman they want a selfie with. The waiter's whole body tenses. His head snaps up. His eyes go wide. And suddenly everything shifts. She's no longer just a woman in simple clothes. She's a Hollywood icon, a legend. And he treated her like dirt. His breathing becomes shallow. The rich guests, who had laughed along with him earlier, now look at him like he's the biggest fool in the room. His biggest mistake wasn't just humiliating a customer. It was humiliating the wrong person. Sandra gives a small, knowing smile. "But that's the thing, isn't it?" she says softly. "It shouldn't matter who I am." The room falls silent. Sandra pushes back her chair and stands. It's not about who someone is. It's about how you treat people when you think they're nobody. With that, she turns and walks toward the exit. Keanu watches as Sandra gracefully leaves the table. Then, he looks at the waiter, this poor man, visibly shaking. Keanu gives him one last look of disappointment. "You should be thankful for this lesson," Keanu says. "Not everyone gets a second chance." And with that, he turns and follows Sandra out, leaving behind a room full of silent, regretful people. The waiter slowly sinks into the chair. His hands grip his apron tightly. Today, he didn't just lose a tip, he lost his dignity. But the real question is, will this change him forever? Keep watching, because what happens next will bring the most powerful ending yet. The door swings shut behind Keanu and Sandra. Inside, the waiter remains frozen, his heart pounding. The realization of what just happened sinks in. The rich guests who had laughed with him earlier now refuse to make eye contact. The restaurant manager shakes his head in disappointment. And the waiter? He feels small. Outside, a light drizzle begins to fall. Sandra and Keanu walk side by side, the city lights reflecting off the wet pavement. Sandra lets out a small breath of amusement. "You didn't have to do that," she says. Keanu chuckles. "Yeah, but you would have done it for yourself." She looks at him, a beat of silence between them. "You always do this, don't you?" she asks. Keanu smirks. "Do what?" "Stand up for the underdog." Keanu tilts his head slightly. "Isn't that what we're supposed to do?" Sandra looks back at the restaurant. "You know, it's funny," she says softly. "People only care about who you are when they realize what you can do for them." She turns back to Keanu. "But the ones who really matter, they treat you with respect from the start." Keanu nods. "And those are the people worth keeping." A silent understanding passes between them. Then, with one last glance at the glowing city, they walk into the night. Because tonight, they didn't just teach a lesson. They reminded the world of something far more important. If you were in that restaurant, would you have laughed with the others? Or would you have stood up for what's right? Let us know in the comments. And remember, respect isn't about status, it's about character.